Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here on another episode of Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskett. Coming up on today's show, a look at 2023 crop budgets, a weather update, as well as a deep dive into the cattle markets. We will get to those stories coming up in a bit, but first. Last week, our team traveled out to the Pacific Northwest to join a group of Nebraska wheat producers and other stakeholders in Portland, Oregon. The area is an important one for wheat, as 50% of domestic wheat production is exported. 60% of wheat exports travel up through the PNW. We attended the Wheat Export and Marketing Workshop, which is designed to help connect the dots between the wheat fields and the end users or exporters. That trip, sponsored by the Nebraska Wheat Board, was organized by the Wheat Marketing Center. Our time in Portland kicked off with a welcome from the folks at the Wheat Marketing Center. There we learned firsthand about the important relationships between state wheat and grain commissions, producers, and the Wheat Marketing Center.
We primarily do research on wheat quality, and use quality with a focus on how wheat is used, whether it's a hamburger bun or an instant noodle. The value of U.S. wheat really comes from the fact that we can match any class of wheat to any product. And so that's what we do here, is really helping customers understand how to maximize their use of U.S. wheat. But we also do a lot of education, both for customers abroad and also, like what we're doing this week, with growers to help them understand what the market is looking for and why the decisions they make in the field are so important.
First things first is odor, so we'll just shake the sample.
For foreign and domestic buyers of U.S. wheat, it's all about the quality of the grain. The Wheat Marketing Center has a lab at a small commercial baking facility to research different types and blends of wheat. That ensures that grain is suitable for the global market and makes value-added products for consumers.
So first of all, with the wheat itself, we want to have an understanding of, is this sound grain coming into the market? Because if it's not, we want to make sure that's not actually making that out there into the distribution pipeline. The other thing is we want to make sure we have an understanding of what those protein contents are, what the moisture levels are before we go into processing, because that will impact a lot of the things that we need to adjust when we go into the milling process. Of course, once you mill it, you've physically transformed it, and that changes a whole host of things. And so once we have that flour, we need to run a whole range of other tests to make sure that it's suitable for the different products that we want to use it for.
Number one part of value.
The group visited several locations in and around Portland to follow the wheat story. One tour was at Marcy Baking, which is a local wholesale bakery. The general manager told us he's always excited to connect with the producers who grow the products that he uses.
I think it's awesome to work with farmers. I'm hoping that someday I have the time to go see into the farm to see where the wheat comes from actually, which would be great. Like yesterday we had a tour, and one of the farmers recognized that the sugar we use here, the bee sugar, that comes from their farm. They were very excited and very happy. I think it's great when we can tie together where the product comes from, what we do with it, and where it's going to end up. I think it's a great thing when we can all tie those three together.
In addition to the Wheat Marketing Center and Marcy Bakery, the group also saw grain exported through the United Grain Terminal in Vancouver, Washington. And perhaps a highlight for many on the tours was a ride on a tugboat that's used to move 100,000 bushel barges up and down the river. Some of us even got to steer that tugboat. That was a great trip, a lot of fun to join wheat growers and other stakeholders of the wheat industry. Coming up over the next several weeks, we'll be bringing you some additional content from those tours and meetings. You can also visit the Market Journal social media accounts for some behind-the-scenes photos and videos. Moving on now, the Nebraska Pork Producers Association says that 2022 was the first year of normal production that they saw since the pandemic disruptions. My colleague Alex Makovicka had a chance to catch up with Al Junke. He serves as the executive director of that group. Al reviewed some of the success they saw in 2022 and previews what could be ahead here in 2023.
Yeah, well, again, here in Nebraska, like around the country, I think livestock people have been happy to get into maybe a full year of non-COVID production, right? So COVID, while it's still around, it's in our rearview mirror as far as, packing plant slowdowns and staff illness on the farms and all the things we went through with having to maybe even downsize or euthanize our herds back then. This has been a good year. So, I mean, as we look at 2022 in review, again, our prices were fairly good. So that was a positive, much higher than what we saw in the COVID year. Of course, offsetting that, with every good, there's always some input costs we need to talk about. And so, yeah, our feed costs were up, our fuel costs were up, but for our farmers that were feeding their own grains and locking in some good prices, I think there were some profits out there. And so, overall, in our barns and on our farms, I think people are back to normal and enjoying a fairly good year, at least from the pork side.
Yeah, you touched a little on the pork industry, but I know you mentioned some disease challenges. What were some of those things that producers were facing this last year?
Yeah, we're a little we're still trying to figure out. We've got a lot of PRRS, PRRS. That's that respiratory disease in pigs. If people aren't familiar with the swine industry, but PRRS, it affects our litter size. It affects our sow health. It's in our barns, and usually it's a seasonal disease, but we're seeing it more year round. It's different strains of the disease. So we're busy trying to figure out how do we prevent it, but B, how do we get rid of it once it's in our barns? So for farmers that had that, it's been kind of a challenge, and consequently, we've seen our sow herds kind of reduced a little bit because there is those disease in the barns, and our pig numbers are a little lower than maybe we've seen historically. And a lot of that, again, is predicated, I'd say a lot of it, on the PRRS and other disease pressures we're seeing. But if you have pigs to sell and you've kept control of that disease and you get into the market, again, I think farmers have done pretty well.
So Al, that's the commodity, the producer, the that side of things. When you look at education and outreach, what are some of those highlights from the last year?
Well, at least for our office here in our group in Nebraska, we're fully staffed for the first time since COVID too. So we have a brand new education director we brought on board, and Sophia Lentfer is her name, and she's been working closely with our show pig folks, our elementary and high schools, and into our college, and bringing that education to them. And we're also starting, again, producer education meetings. We have a new director of Allied and Producer Services, and his name is Steve Hofer. And Steve came on board this year, and now he's out here in the last quarter, plus going into next year, we'll be holding regional producer meetings. So we bring a number of topics out there for our producers. We educate them, which, as you know, with checkoff dollars, there's three things you can do: promotion, education, and research. And so we focus heavily on all three of those with our staff and with our outreach.
All right, Al, you look into 2023, you mentioned the new staff, but what are some other things you guys are looking forward to?
Well, I think one of the positives we're seeing as we look back the last year or two through this year, we're actually seeing an interest in people building barns again. We haven't seen that for a while. Nebraska is in a great big expansion mode and has been for a number of years. We have a lot of room for barns, good place if you're concerned about biosecurity, for building sow farms and finishing barns. And so we've seen a lot of that, but it's slowed, again, for various reasons, mainly supply chain issues. Product costs were way higher than people wanted to spend, and the bankers and the farmers are kind of sat still the last couple of years. But now, both in our office and around the state, we're hearing of people looking for sites for barns, pricing some facilities, looking for farmer cooperators if and integrators are out there again, looking for folks that want to participate. And of course, people are understanding that commodity underneath the barns, that manure, is very valuable in a time of high inputs on our corn and soybean crops. Boy, having that manure to put out on your field, plus making some money on those pigs in the barn, really adds to that bottom line. So again, we're seeing some resurgence of that. So we're hopeful and positive that 2023 might see some more expansion again in our pig numbers.
Thanks to Alex and to Al for that conversation. We'll be keeping a close eye on those pork markets as the year continues to roll on. Shifting our focus over to the cattle markets now, we took a trip out to Seward this week to catch up with a Market Journal fan favorite to get some of his thoughts when it comes to the cattle markets. Here's my conversation with Mike Briggs from Briggs Feed Yard on Thursday morning. We're out here with Mike Briggs at Briggs Feed Yard. Mike, as a cattle feeder, you have to be okay when the snow amounts are not on the top end of what they were estimating.
We got really lucky. I feel really bad for the people in western Nebraska because they got pounded. We ended up with only about an inch of snow. Now, of course, we had to have 3 hours worth of freezing rain on top of that, so that was unnecessary because my general view of ice, it belongs in my glass with bourbon on top of it. So anyway.
Well, thanks for coming back to Market Journal. It's been a while. Let's catch up on your thoughts of the cattle markets right now.
Well, you know, I've been gone and it's gone up, so that's been pretty good for everybody. You know, things are going pretty good right now. Now that we've gotten past the first of the year, though, January, February are kind of your worst beef demand months of the year, so that's going to be a struggle. Now, we don't have the numbers that we typically have, but we have enough. And with the weather that we've had, people are pretty willing sellers because once cattle have been hurt in this kind of weather, you just got to market them. So we're not going to be very tough fighters on the selling part, I don't think. So it's going to be kind of interesting as we go forward here. I think we're going to struggle for a minute.
What do you mean by struggle specifically?
I think we're going to back this thing up $2 to $3, $4, $5. Now you look at the board. The board's had it looks worse on a chart, but we've had about a $4 break from our high. I think we're going to struggle here till we get into middle into February, you know, and things really don't get good till people start pulling those grills out. So maybe it's March, but the thing that's in our favor right now, supply of fat cattle is not going to be extreme, and that's going to keep it's going to keep the bottom from falling out like it typically does. So we're going to be okay, but we're not going to be where we've been through the month of December.
All right, let's talk about the fact that, well, exactly the point you're bringing up here. 2022 seemed like it was the year of herd liquidation. Do you expect a similar trend here in 2023, or do you think that might turn around?
Great question. I think the drought's over. La Nina's going to die. I think the drought's over. And when I was smarting off at Cattlemen's Convention, I'm like, instead of buying a lottery ticket, go out and buy heifers and breed them, because if we have rain, people are going to start restocking their herds. Now that's got to have a double effect. Yeah, they're going to start stocking their herds, but that's going to take heifers away from the feed yard, and keeping your feed yard with any kind of capacity here for probably the next 2 years is really going to be a challenge.
Yeah, we do have a cattle on feed report that's due out this Friday, so tomorrow, as you and I have this conversation on Thursday morning.
And an inventory report.
Inventory report coming up too. Your thoughts on both those reports?
I think you're going to see that we whacked a lot of cows again because of the drought. I think you're going to see numbers are down. I think you're going to see not as many cattle outside of feed yards. So for me, it's not going to be very fun, because it's going forward here. It's going to be a challenge to buy cattle that make any kind of sense, and it's going to be really hard to keep capacity in your feed yards. And like I tell people, we're basically a cattle hotel. We rent space, we serve food, and if I don't have any cattle, it's pretty hard to make any money.
Mike, I want to get your thoughts on the price difference between the North and the South. Some of the prices we've seen there. Why the major differences we've seen?
You know, the biggest reason was Nebraska lost our cost of gain average. We had several years there, 17, 18, 19, maybe even kind of 20, where we had big corn crops even in Kansas. So our corn was not at a discount to theirs anymore. Everything was kind of the same. Well, because of feeding conditions in the winter, people just swarmed into Kansas because they are having a lot of dry winters. And so they had a huge supply and have had a huge supply of cattle. You could hardly find a feed yard to put cattle in down there. They've been so full. So conversely, then they have a lot of fat cattle for sale. So and they still don't feed as good a quality animals as we do here. You had a $20 to a $30 choice select spread. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of demand from the packer for choice product, and they just don't have that. So they had a lot of cattle that weren't as good a quality as ours, so those cattle went to a discount. Now, they've kind of got that cleaned up a little bit, so you're seeing that spread narrow or totally vanish, and I think you're definitely going to see it stay that way just for lack of supply of cattle in general.
Something we'll keep an eye on. Your thoughts on 2023? You made some bold predictions here so far and shared them, but perhaps what's your biggest concern going into this new year?
That our incredible leadership in Washington totally wrecks our economy and nobody has any money. Beef is going to get high enough that it's going to come out of some people's diets, and I hate that, but the supply of fat cattle is just not going to be here, and it's going to get worse before it gets better because, like I said earlier, once these ranchers pull these heifers off the market, that's that many less cattle to feed. And I think, demand's pretty solid. If people just have the money, I think we're going to stay in here. And I think the cattle feeder's got some opportunity here with the inventory that he owns presently to make some money. Going forward after that, it's going to be a little difficult.
Any particular risk management you want to leave us with today?
Just be careful. There's a lot of people out there just blowing their brains out, buying cattle that are losers, anticipating that, we're going to get $1.80, $2 for fat cattle. Well, not if no one has any money to pay for it, you're not. So I think you need to be really careful there and not just buy cattle and think that there's never going to be another bad day, because that's about the time it kicks you in the butt.
Mike, as always, we appreciate your blunt assessment of what's going on in these cattle markets.
Thank you.
It's always fun to have Mike here on Market Journal. We sure appreciate his time this week. Coming up next week, we'll be joined by author and analyst Elaine Cubb. If you have a question you'd like me to ask Elaine, go ahead and email us, and I'll be sure to pass your question along. Well, farm safety is one of those areas that all of us involved in agriculture can improve on. Aaron Yoder with the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Central State Center for Agricultural Safety and Health believes that Feed Yard 15, a program comprised of training modules to assist farm managers in conducting farm safety training for anywhere around the farm or ranch, could help in this area. That program began in the feed yard with the feed yard in mind, but covers stockmanship and some other areas of livestock as well. You can learn more about this program in the January issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time to check on weather with Market Journal's Bill Boyer. Well, Bill, another week with some winter weather across the state of Nebraska. Let's kick off your forecast with a look at some of those snow totals.
We'll definitely do that, Bryce. We'll start here with a look at the map. This is Wednesday's snowfall totals. You'll see the far northwestern portions of the state picked up 2 to 5 inches of snow, and then a good half a foot to a foot for most of the rest of the state. Some areas here over 2 feet of snow fell with this, and then the far southeast portion of the state missed out on the heaviest snowfall because it stayed more rain, and I don't think anybody's going to complain about missing out here on this snow. 23.7 inches, that's the most we've officially seen from 6 miles west of Myrna. 19 inches at Broken Bow, Lexington 17, Chapel 16, North Platte set an all-time daily snowfall record for them. This is great news for the drought because of course, storm fell after the latest drought map went into effect. But look at some of these areas where we overlay that last map that we showed you where the heavier snow fell, the southern portions of the Nebraska Panhandle, right here through some of these extreme drought areas, picked up very beneficial moisture, and that is excellent news as we go forward here in our drought outlook. Hopefully we can start to whittle down some of these areas. Now, we have a change here overall fundamentally in the weather. We were seeing a lot of Pacific systems that were battering the west. This one able to make it through that got to us. Now today, these systems are coming in more Alberta Clipper style. This system off just to the south of us going to clip the southeastern part of the state and move off to the east of us. We're going to be left with another little clipper system coming down as we go into Tuesday and Wednesday. Again, it's probably going to miss most of us, and this one looks like it's going to go south of us as well. Wednesday and then into Thursday, another little system coming through. And again, it's not a situation where we expect terribly beneficial moisture out of this, but we do see chances off and on of some light rain or snow showers here with this particular system. Cold temps here today, and this cold air is going to continue for a few more days before it starts to moderate as we go into next week. Still chilly highs, 20s and 30s across most of the state. But notice what happens late in the week. We start to build some warmth in here, and by Friday, maybe getting temps back up above normal. and get out of that snowfall cover that we have in many locations. Precip, most of the state could pick up a little bit, nothing overly significant. I think in terms of snow, a dusting to an inch or two. 8 to 14 day outlook, again favoring colder than normal temperatures here as we go into the next week, and about equal chances of precip. And extending that out into our 30-day outlook, maybe a slight chance of below normal temperatures. And as far as precip goes, we're going to have about equal chances, as again, most of the precip looks like it's going to go off to the north of us. So we got the moisture when we needed it, and let's hope we can find some more to get on top of it as this system changes the way our weather pattern's working.
All right, thank you very much for that forecast, Bill. Finally today, budgets can help estimate expected income, expense, and profit. As we look forward to another growing season, the University of Nebraska has released a new round of crop budgets. No surprise here, all 84 budgets indicate a rising cost of production. To learn more about the 2023 crop budgets, we sat down with Extension Educator and Farm and Ranch Management Analyst Glennis McClure. We are talking about the latest round of the crop budgets now for 2023. You publish these annually.
Right.
Big picture, why is it important that the university does this research and shares this information?
Well, I think it's a lot of people use our information, and the University of Nebraska has done these for many, many years, and we've got a lot of detail behind those. And so we have folks from all across the Midwest actually that look to our budgets for information that we provide. But I think the key thing, the reason we do those is they're a guide for producers to take a look at and to utilize or pick out what budgets kind of fit what they're doing, and then just make some modifications, because it's really important that folks do their own. You know, every farming operation is unique. And so you really can't look at one of our budgets and say, that's mine, because there's so much that goes into it. And we're trying to make it easier all the time for them to be able to do their own.
Nebraska is a diverse state when it comes to the eastern end to the west side.
Exactly.
How many crops, or give us an idea of the kinds of crops that you cover within the budgets?
Right. Well, we actually have 84 different budgets, and they are numbered 1 through 84. We start off with alfalfa. Basically, if you look at the list, they're alphabetized. So of course we got the most is corn, because corn's grown across the state in just about every county. But it goes down to wheat, of course, sugar beets, dry edible beans, soybeans. We even have some pasture budgets. There's a couple cover crop budgets in there. So it really covers a lot of different crops that are grown in Nebraska.
Well, over the past few years, we've faced some interesting challenges in the row crop sector and all of agriculture across the Midwest. We've got a lot of input prices that are up, but commodity prices are also up. As you look at this year's budgets, what are you seeing?
Well, definitely, we saw an increase in all the budgets as I took a look at those after we were done with them all. Yes, we saw increases in cost of production as our estimates going into 2023. Now, again, some of the research that we do on the input prices will come in that August to September, October timeframe, and so some of that could change, because already some of the fertilizer prices have backed off a little bit. We saw the reverse of that a year ago. We probably had things a little low, even like fuel prices were lower, and then as soon as we got those things published, we saw a tick up in fertilizer, fuel, that kind of thing. So this year, again, we're still seeing those higher prices, and some of that was, factored in now for going into 2023. It really depends, again, the uniqueness of farmers and their different situations, where for 2022, they might have locked in some lower input prices going into that year. And then what they did this year, I don't know, but some of those higher input costs probably were made up for, as they're looking into 2023.
Glennis, when you visit with those who use the crop budgets, how are they able to take that information and customize it for their operation? Can you share an example of that?
Well, we've done those budgets for years and years using Excel. And we continue to do that, and those are found on our CAP website as well as the Crop Watch website. But the last few years now, I've entered those, or I've had a student help, and we've entered those into the Ag Budget Calculator program. So that's a new resource that we've developed, and it's really well developed now for the crop side of things. And so folks, I'm teaching that constantly. more users, the better, because we really want folks to be able to take a look at our budgets, perhaps download those into the ABC program, those that fit their operations, and then go in and make modifications. Some of the key things that would need to be modified, of course, is their machinery and their equipment, because their costs and the items that we choose are kind of, middle of the road, maybe even lower cost, where some folks, of course, there's been a big jump up in those prices too, for combines, tractors, implements, that kind of thing. And then also even like the fuel, as well as land costs, land and rent, we know has gone up. I think in the values that we put into the budgets this last year, overall, they went up about 16% from the year prior. So all of those things need to be taken into consideration. So we want folks to be able to put their own information into, like the ag budget calculator, and crank out their own budgets.
As we wrap up our conversation today, Glennis, any surprises in the numbers that you saw this year?
Not really. I guess definitely on the wheat side of things, it was kind of, if you look at over the last 2 years, I think we saw over a 60% increase in the input costs there. And, we're still talking around that 20 to 25% increase in costs. And I guess the one thing too, you mentioned that, of course, commodity prices have been higher. Is that, yes, our costs were higher, commodity prices have, luckily, that's kept up with. And actually, as you look at some of our charts that I've developed to show how actually our profit margins have increased. The last few years, we've actually done pretty well, even though the cost side's been going up. But that's definitely something we want to watch. What happens when your yields change, when you're, over time here, what's going to happen with the commodity prices. And so that's why it's really important to know your cost of production so you can make some decisions from that.
Some really useful information here. Glennis, we appreciate the time today.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks again to Glennis for taking time out of her schedule to come talk with us. If you'd like some additional information when it comes to 2023 crop budgets, we've posted an informative link with some details on those. You can find that on the Market Journal website. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. If you didn't miss a story, be sure you're following Market Journal on YouTube and on social media to join in on the conversation. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.